Representative Soñia Galaviz of Boise sits on the Education Committee, the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, the Ethics and House Policy Committee, and the Resources and Conservation Committee. She joins us this week to talk about the proposed constitutional convention, tax cuts, and other major policies being discussed in the legislature this week. Thank you so much, Representative Galaviz, for joining us today here in the studio. The first question that we usually ask representatives we have on the show is, what's the general atmosphere been like in the legislature this week? What are some of the major bills that are being worked on, and what's the general environment been like?
Well, the temperature of the entire session this year has been a little heated and a little tense just because of the budget constraints that we were walking into at the start of session. And so we've got some pretty hefty cuts that will be coming forward. We had the governor's 3% ongoing cuts and rescission. And then while in session, there has been an additional 1% and 2% cuts. And there's some agencies that are going to have to make really hard decisions with programs and staff because of it. And so it's been something that weighs on all of our minds, because every policy piece you put forward, how does that affect these agencies amidst the cuts?
So I know that you just mentioned the potential budget cuts and the proposed budget cuts and the constraints that you're facing. Can you tell me specifically, with you serving on the Education Committee, what those budget cuts could look like specifically regarding education in the state?
So education, our governor had said that he would hold K-12 harmless from these cuts. We are seeing cuts go forward for the 2027 year. Most of them reside in the department, so professional development or internal to the Department of Education. They're trying to hold, I do appreciate that they're trying to hold K-12, their operational budgets harmless. Some things that are ancillary cuts that still affect K-12 is, health insurance is a good example. So we've got on average about 14% premium increases for health insurance across our state and our school districts. And those school districts that are on the state health insurance plan, they're going to see a $9 million reduction in support going out to help pay for that state insurance. So that's one way. Another way is we're seeing several $1 million cut in career technical education. CTE is a very valued program in K-12 and into our community college. And so the CTE cuts would affect what our students are able to access at the high school level and those certification programs that they've had opportunities to. So even though K-12 is not taking as deep of cuts as other agencies, there are still budget submissions that would impact what we're able to do.
And moving to a slightly different topic and potential concern is, last week the House of Representatives passed I'm not sure if it was a bill or a resolution, so I'd love to be corrected on that either way, that proposed a national constitutional convention to target the federal government passing a balanced budget. Can you tell us how you voted on that and your perspective on that resolution?
Yeah, I voted no on that because constitutional convention, there's never any assurance about what all will try to be, could be addressed or what would come up for amendments or modification. While I think we can all get behind, we need to have balanced budgets and not overspend and not take our country into profound debt. I think everybody is open to that conversation and that work ahead. But once you agree to have a constitutional convention, it could be a situation to where all bets are off. And given the current administration, I do not trust that it would be focused primarily on just balanced budgets. It could be other things such as having presidents serve for more terms than the Constitution currently allows, or who knows what. It seems fairly uncertain what the agenda would be in DC, and so I was a no vote, and I feel confident that I was representing the voice of my district on that vote.
And moving back to some bills that were introduced in the Education Committee, can you tell us your opinion and your perspective on the bill introduced to start the school year later than Labor Day? Can you tell us a little bit more about that bill and your opinion on it?
Yeah, so we saw that House bill this morning for the full hearing and it died in committee. And that had to do with the very vocal opposition from around the state. We are an agriculture state, and many of our local school districts and the communities, they have flexible calendar schedules to where they take a break during harvest. That's a big deal, like potato harvest, and giving students the ability to go either work on family farms or be able to provide, babysitting or family care for others who are working. We also have school districts that really cherish their 4-day school weeks where they go a little longer during the school day, but they go 4 days a week. And by mandating that they start after Labor Day would force them to meet their hour and day requirements of instruction, would force them to take their school year into June. We had numerous testifiers today that said this was a non-starter for their community, that they already build their school calendars around the desires and wishes of their families that they serve, and that this would be government overreach. I was a no vote, and it did die in committee.
And I know that we're a little bit over the half point of the legislative session. Could you tell us what your legislative priorities have been and what your plans are for the rest of the session? That can be bills you've introduced or votes you're planning on casting, any priorities that you have had and are looking forward to pursuing in the back half of the session.
Sure. I mean, we hope it's the halfway point. Sometimes it's hard to predict when we'll end, but my focus and my priorities typically remain inside of the public education space. I'm a school teacher. I've been a teacher in Idaho schools for 22 years. And so my students and the families that I serve and the schools that I teach are my priority and my North Star when I'm down here. So the legislation that I have brought forward or that I'm currently working on address school district facility funding. We also look at different ways of getting facility dollars out to school districts and to communities without further burdening the taxpayers, without having to go for a bond on buildings. I've also worked in the virtual education space, bringing some consistency between school districts and charters on how they have and execute virtual education programs. And so I have several bills that are still circulating, depending on where they are in the process. But education, for me, is the reason I'm here.
And thank you so much, Representative Galaviz, for joining us here today. The last question that I usually ask people is, what's the best way for your constituents to be involved in the legislative process? And also, sorry, I said I had one more, but actually I have two. So that question, so what's the best way to be involved in the process? And then what inspired you to run for the legislature and become a public servant in this capacity?
Sure. So best way to get involved with the legislative process is making sure you know what's happening down here. And because things move so quickly, that can be a challenge. I would encourage folks to subscribe to the newsletters and follow social media and the email information updates from your elected legislators in your district, but also to folks across the state that you like their work, their communication, and that they prioritize things that matter to you. So you don't just have to pay attention to your electeds, but also what's happening across the state that, those who have outreach and opportunities to engage. For example, my website, SoñiaGalaviz.com, I have an Eyes on Education page, and I track every public school bill, whether it starts on the Senate or the House, and I let people know what the bill's about. I link everything, who to get in contact with, and then I give my 2 cents on the bill coming forward. I do that for the education community across the state. I want them to know what is proposed that would potentially affect them. And, you know, I've said before that I prioritize policy regarding public education. That is the reason I'm down here, and that is what inspired me to run. My students, the families that I serve, and the schools that I've been, you know, it's been my absolute privilege to teach in. My whole professional life has been dedicated to public schools. And, you know, over the years that I've taught, I have seen an erosion of support for our public educators and for what we do. And I want to make sure there's someone down here that's boots on the ground, that's someone that's in the classroom, that's fighting for good policy and making sure that we're doing the best we can for our schools and our kids.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Representative. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for the call.
Perfect.